will help her heal more quickly. It will cleanse. It will help the muscles in her nether regions to come back tighter. Hey, what's going on, Renaissance Lifers? Welcome back to Renaissance Life TV, where we take life to a whole new level. I'm your host Lee, and I'm glad you're here today. I just wanted to share that I've really been having a great time making these videos for you all, and I'm really excited to continue bringing you great content. If you're already a subscriber, thank you and welcome back. And if you're new, please take a second to subscribe and make sure to hit the bell icon so you can receive notifications when I post other videos like this one. So today we're talking about newborn baby tips for dads. And if you haven't seen my previous video, home birth tips for dads, it's also got a lot of great tips for pregnancy and birth, whether it's a home birth or a hospital birth, from a dad's perspective for dads and also for moms as well. Initially, when I started my YouTube channel, part of what I was trying to do was aim toward a male audience. But since then, I've found that I want to share my voice with everyone. I'm still going to do a series of videos that'll be aimed toward dads from a dad's perspective. But I promise you that whether you're a man or a woman, you'll get a lot of great tips and advice, because in reality, it's a partnership, and most of the tips that I'm going to share today can be helpful for both a father and a mother. So the last thing I'll say before I get started, I thought of making this like a 7 tips, and really I have to give a shout out to my wife here, because she reminded me about a lot of things that I forgot that we used to do, or things that helped us early on with our first 2 children. So I was able to write a lot of that down, and I just realized it was going to be like 10 tips, 15 tips, too many tips if I actually wrote it out. So I'm just going to tell you everything, but I promise you'll find this video informative and practical. These are my newborn baby tips for dads and moms. So the first thing that I'll talk about is getting help. One of the big things with having a newborn baby is that a baby may take a lot more of your time. And even if the baby doesn't take a lot more of your time per se, having a newborn baby takes time to adjust to and to acclimate to. So your schedule will likely be in flux early on. You'll be trying to find a new routine and get into a new groove. So a lot of the things that you used to do at a certain time in planning for the week, like cooking, may not get done. So our newborn baby Claire just turned 1 month old yesterday, and one of the big things that we normally do as a family is cook for the week in preparation and meal prep for the week, so we know exactly what we're going to eat for lunch and for dinner. But with having a newborn baby, our cooking schedule has really taken a hit, so we haven't been able to cook as much, as often, and as consistently as we would like to. So when people have asked us how they can help, we tell them, bring us a meal, because that's one less meal that we have to think about. It's not that we can't go out and get it ourselves or cook it ourselves, but it takes so much more work and effort right now, especially in the early stages of having the baby, that having someone bring it over is just so helpful. So don't be afraid to be specific about what you need done from people. Now, on the note of help, a lot of people have the luxury of being able to have their mothers come over and spend the first month with them or extended periods of time and help. If you have that, that's great. Now, one thing I will say here is make sure that the person you're going to bring over, whether it's your mother or a friend, is going to be someone who's going to be helpful and is not going to take more of your energy and attention from being there. So some people will come over almost as a vacation and to see the new baby and say that they want to help, but then you're still required to take them out, and they're still expecting you to take them out to eat. They're still expecting you to prepare their meals, or they're simply expecting you to entertain and talk to them for an extended period of time. There's nothing wrong with that, but understand that when you have a newborn baby, like, your mind is exhausted, you're fried. A lot of times you just need some quiet time. So if you have someone that you have to entertain, that can be draining. And it's no offense to them, but it's just a unique situation and position that you're in. So really consider that if you're going to have someone over helping, maybe do it for short periods at a time or space people out in between. And last but not least, if you know you have someone who may not be the best to be around, find a way to respectfully and gently tell them that maybe they can come and visit 6 months in. My wife and I typically have a routine where we don't have any overnight visitors for the first couple months of having the baby. We really take that time to bond as a family, to recuperate, to find our equilibrium, to be able to figure out our schedules during that time. A lot of times adding someone else to the mix can really throw a wrench into that and prolong that process from you actually being able to get back in the flow. So we're able to get in the flow very quickly because we know what works for us. One of the biggest things that you're going to encounter as a new dad is lack of sleep or sleep deprivation. Now, in as much as the dad will feel sleep deprivation, if you have a wife or a girlfriend, she will likely be sleep deprived. So I want you to consider the impact that lack of sleep has on your mood, on your patience, and everything in between. Here's a trick that my wife and I use that really helps us, and it really feels like we're in the grind, but it's a team effort. So one of the things that we do is we take turns napping. So if we're both tired and we're both exhausted and sleepy, but one of us has to stay up and watch the kids or do something else, we'll usually say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take an hour nap each. Who wants to go first? So while she takes an hour nap, I'll have the kids, and I'll watch something or try to keep myself occupied and up during that time, even if I'm like super exhausted. And then we'll switch off and I'll take an hour nap and she'll take the kids. And that's just a really easy and effective way of being able to catch some shut-eye where both of you are tired or both of you just feel like you're exhausted. So typically the mom tends to be the one that has the brunt of the burdens and responsibility when it comes to a newborn baby. So if you're a dad, this is an opportunity to think of any way in which you can be helpful, lessen the burden, or lessen the load. So one of the things that I did, particularly as a first-time dad, if your baby is bottle fed, then take turns waking up to feed the baby with the bottle. Or maybe what you want to do as the man is do the bottle feeding at night. Whenever the baby wakes up, you can take the baby, feed them with the bottle, and then give the baby to mom or put the baby down. Another thing that you can do is that if the baby is breastfed, then obviously there's nothing that you can do as a dad to breastfeed the baby. At a minimum, you can be the one to get up and take the baby. If the baby is in a crib in another room, you can be the one to go and grab the baby and bring the baby to mom, so that way the baby can be breastfed and take the baby back to the crib once the baby falls asleep. One of the things that I did was, since my wife was the one waking up in the middle of the night and breastfeeding the babies, I took on the diaper responsibility for the time that I was off and at home. So anytime the baby pooped or needed a diaper change, I took the diaper no matter what. So that was kind of like my way of having one thing that I do that I could take off of her plate. So she exclusively breastfeeds the baby and I exclusively change the diapers. That's just something she doesn't have to worry about, especially since a lot of times the baby will poop and soil their diaper during breastfeeding or during feeding. So you can imagine you're feeding the baby, taking the time to feed the baby, and then you have to change the diaper. So that's just one thing that I thought of that could be helpful. And now, baby 2 and 3 later, my wife has expressed how that was really helpful, and that's something that she really enjoyed and appreciated. So think of things that will be helpful to your wife or partner. And if you can't think of anything, ask them what might be helpful. Now, before I go any further, there's one thing that I wanted to point out here. A lot of these tips are going to sound phenomenal and great, and there are many of them, if not all of them, are things that I've done at one time or another or throughout the pregnancies. But there are also things that I started doing over time. So I've matured a ton from the time we had our first baby to the time we had our third baby. And part of that means that there are things that I do now or that come naturally and easily to me now that I never did during our first baby. So understand that there's a learning curve. There's a huge learning curve becoming a parent, and a lot of it just comes by doing, right? You learn by doing, and very little that you're gonna do is gonna actually harm your baby. So that was one of the things that I used to tell my wife all the time. Like, I had a lot of experience with babies, and a lot of it is instincts, right? You just gotta trust your instincts. And know that as a dad, you have instincts too. So a lot of time we talk about a mom's instinct and she just feels things and has that intuition. A dad has his own instincts as well. So be willing and able to trust your instincts to know what to do and what might help in a given situation. For instance, if the baby is crying, I have special tricks and techniques on how to calm the baby. And that's just a skill that I have. And a lot of the tips and techniques that I do don't make a lot of sense. They're not easy to explain, but they just made sense in my head. So I figured, what if I hold the baby this way? Or I noticed that if I put the baby upright, then the baby will kind of calm down. So I do that every time the baby is ready to cry, and that will give me a little bit more time before the baby will start crying to the point that she will need her mother absolutely. And what that means in turn is that my wife has a little bit more time to do what she's trying to do, to finish something up, to use the bathroom, to take a shower before she has to absolutely grab the baby where the baby is just inconsolable. If your wife or partner is breastfeeding, one of the big things is milk production. So milk doesn't just start right away. The first thing that usually comes is colostrum, and it's like a thick, kind of really fatty milk, if you will, that comes out of the breast for the baby. And you're not going to see that. Typically, you can't just press it and see it squirt out. So it's very deceptive in that way. But after the colostrum flows and the baby gets all that sort of fattening milk, then the milk will usually start to come in and you'll see it more liquidy, sort of your more typical milk that you would imagine. Now, to help with milk production, there's something called mother's milk. And what mother's milk is, it's a tea. I'll put a link to it down in the description or a picture of it. And it's a tea that you can buy at Walmart, Publix, certainly Whole Foods, or any sort of health food market. It helps a woman's milk production to come in. So in all of my wife's pregnancies, after she's had the baby, usually a couple days in, she'll start taking mother's milk, and usually the day after she takes mother's milk, and there are a ton of testimonials about this, she'll wake up and the pillow that she's sleeping on will be soaked in milk. So the milk will really come in and really become strong for the baby. So that's just a tip of something that you can go out and run and grab for her, so that way her milk production can start or become stronger, especially when the baby is going through growth spurts where they're drinking but crying a lot, because the breast is reactive, the body is reactive. The more the baby sucks, the longer the baby sucks, the more the signal is sent to the body that more milk needs to be produced. But at the moment the baby is sucking and going through a growth spurt and needing more milk, the body may not be producing the same amount as of yet, but usually by the very next day you'll see the breast become engorged and filled with milk in response to the baby's cluster feeding, if you will. And that's a term you can look up. What is cluster feedings? And cluster feedings go on specific cycles, because babies go through growth spurts. There's 2 weeks, there's 4 weeks. So these are times where you might find the baby seems like they're insatiable. They just keep drinking, and they're drinking milk, they're on the breast, but then they still keep crying. Usually by a day or 2 days, that goes away, and the woman's body will respond and produce what's necessary for the baby. Okay, so one of the next tips for new dads is also one that probably is geared a lot toward the mom as well. The way I think about it is, what can I do? What are some things that I need to know, or things that could help me be more effective as a dad and be more effective as a partner? So one of the things that I did this time was I did a bath for my wife. So they're called bath sits, birth baths. And essentially what these baths are is you run warm water and you use certain herbs in the bath that help in the healing process. In particular, when a mother has had a vaginal birth, these baths really help in the healing process. Will help her heal more quickly. It will cleanse. It will help the muscles in her nether regions to come back tighter. So it really promotes healing. So there are many recipes for these baths, but there are some specific herbs that you kind of will see across the board. And if you're not confident or comfortable making the bath yourself or going out and picking up the individual ingredients, you can also order them online. I've seen them on Amazon, and you will just boil them in a kettle like you would any tea, and then you take the liquid from that and you pour it in a bath along with more water, and then you have the mother lay in that bath for about 30 minutes. So that was one thing I was able to do this time around that I was really excited and happy I was able to do. I kind of had it on my mind for the first 2 pregnancies, but didn't have the mind space, didn't have a way of just getting it done. But this time I was just in a really good space. This wasn't my first or second time at the rodeo, and I was able to just figure it out. And what I did was I used all the herbs that I had available, even though some of the more unique ones I didn't have, but chamomile was one of them. So I had chamomile tea, I had Epsom salt, I had a couple of the other herbs that are more typical to have. And so the big key here is that something is better than nothing. So even if you only had one of the ingredients from the bath, that would be more helpful in a bath to her than not having that bath at all with the hot water, etc. I also did a steam which is another version of it where you take those same herbs and put them in a bucket, boil them, strain the water, and put that in a bucket with hot boiling water, and you have the woman sit over that bucket, and the steam raises from the bucket once it's tolerable, raises from the bucket into her nether regions, and it does a similar thing. This is done a ton in the Caribbean. Usually moms would do that for their daughters, or you'll have like an aunt or something like that. So we didn't have that here, but daddy's the next best thing, and I got it done. So she was really excited to have that bath, and even just to have the 30 minutes to an hour to spend to herself and just kind of recoup and rejuvenate and let the bath do its healing thing for her body. If nothing else, just run a bath and give her 30 minutes to an hour of personal time and to rejuvenate herself so she can come back fresh, refreshed, and revitalized.